Well, U.S. border crossings are at an all-time high. Arguably, this is the most important story to Americans right now. What is happening at the U.S. southern border in 2022? Look at this. We set a new record, 2.2 million illegal border crossings. Those numbers do not include crossings at official checkpoints. That, according to the New York Times, back in 2022. The U.S. set a new record under President Biden with 2.5 million just last year. Again, these are numbers we're getting from the Biden administration, so take this with a grain of salt. We probably think it's way higher than that. U.S. Immigrations and Custom Enforcement deported more than 142,000 immigrants in the fiscal year 2023, according to them. 142,000. So you see how these numbers are totally out of whack? Again, those numbers are totally from the Biden administration here. The rest of them, of course, have been given cell phones. They've been given paychecks. They're given money to live in the United States. They, of course, will be voting in the United States as well, which is all part of the plan. So it all works out in the end for Democrats. Or does it? Listen to Obama's chief strategist, David Axelrod, who just admitted over the weekend that the busing of illegal immigrants into these sanctuary cities, into these Democrat-held cities, is actually changing the game. Listen.
You know, whatever you think about what Governor Abbott has done, it was diabolically clever because by shipping these migrants to cities that call themselves, now I'm forgetting the phrase, but
sanctuary cities.
He has created issue. I come from Chicago. Chicago has been torn apart by this issue. New York has been torn apart by this issue. And suddenly Democrats are engaged in this issue in a different way than they had been. So that has been very effective.
Well, to comment on all of that, plus the bill that's currently being debated in Congress, is a man who is a former U.S. Green Beret. He's a war correspondent, and he is arguably one of the most knowledgeable individuals on the border crisis in the world. He is at the southern border in Texas. He left Panama at the Darien Gap. He's now in Texas, where the drama is unfolding. That is Michael Yon. Michael, welcome back to the show, my friend. Good to see you.
Thanks, Clayton. I'm back in Texas now, actually in Dripping Springs. As you can see, there was some big events in the last week in Texas, down at Eagle Pass and other places still unfolding. And that Al-Qaeda that's reported in Colorado, I'm not even paying attention to the details because the details I've learned through years of doing this sort of thing are actually somewhat irrelevant on the larger scale. I'm looking at the larger invasion. I mean, you know, they could pull out 50 or 500, but these are just basically you're pulling out a few roaches and there's an entire colony, and there are colonies everywhere. They're coming across every single day. And keep in mind, even people that are not Al-Qaeda or Hezbollah or Hamas today or some other group, they will be tomorrow because they're raising children like this, right? We already know that. We've seen it for not just years, but generations. And so basically the news that they've captured maybe, you know, the reports 50 Al-Qaeda in Colorado, to me, that's almost yesterday's news because what I specialize in is more on the ground intelligence and analysis of what's coming tomorrow. And what's coming tomorrow is clearly straight up full-scale kinetic civil war. It's clearly coming. The ball is in motion. It's not about sparks. It's not about any of that. It's all about conditions. Ask any serious military officer, and they'll tell you it's not about sparks. It's always about conditions. And what do they always tell you? When I was in the Army, the military officers were always handing me history books. Read the history, Michael, read the history. And now I've read all kinds of stacks of history books, and I've gone out and I've seen history made in front of my eyes. And that's what's happening right now. We're being invaded. Now with these buses that are busing people up to places like New York and whatnot, Chicago, those are feel-good moments. They make people feel good. Hey, we're teaching them a thing or two. But in fact, we're taking the hypodermic needle and shooting it straight into our heart. The border is still open, bottom line, period. All these other things are just play. The National Guard versus the feds or whatever. The border remains open, period. And now I'm down in Darien Gap all the time, as you know. I was just down there with Brett Weinstein and Chris Martinson and Ann Vandersteel and Masako Ganaha, who's been on your show, and was just down there with them again. And you see the camps are expanding in size. The flows are much more efficient now than they used to be. They've increased from 60 buses to 200 buses. Those are people after they make it through the Darien Gap, they get on buses and they start to head to the United States. So, I mean, I'm watching the infrastructure grow in Ecuador and Colombia and Panama and all the way up through. I was just over in Guatemala talking with intelligence people in Guatemala, and you can see that the United States is installing approximately 8 more camps into Guatemala. These are things that people know. Guatemala is actually a more serious funnel than Panama is. But Panama, I spend so much time in Panama because we also have the canal there. So Panama is one of the most vital terrains on earth especially for the United States. And so and Panama is where you can pick up a pulse of what's actually going on.
Billy Meyer been talking about this going back to the 1940s and 1950s about the wave of Islamists rolling into the United States, the Islamic fundamentalists. You've been predicting this for many, many years, this flood that's coming, and people are simply sitting back and allowing it to happen. And you hear this debate in Congress over the past few hours. So just a few short hours ago, you have Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, going back and forth with Jerry Nadler of New York. And Jerry admits on camera the reason that they want these individuals in the United States is to change the voter rolls and to allow them to vote. Take a listen to this.
That's not true. The New York City Council voted in December to allow this. It begins January 9, 2023. Cities in Vermont and Maryland already allow this, and similar measures are under consideration in Illinois, Maine, and Massachusetts right now.
If the gentleman will yield?
Yes.
I believe those are considerations of allowing votes in municipal elections only.
Right, but thank you. That's the point. Everybody wants to know at home, why would they allow this? Guys, they're allowing it because they're going to turn them into voters. That's what this is about. That's why we're jumping up and down and screaming, my friends on the video who are commenting about this. That's why we're so upset, because our constituents are frightened that we are losing our country. We're losing our security, we're losing our sovereignty, because we're going to allow people from 160 different countries around the world to come in here and decide our elections. That's it. Here it is on record. You all heard it. I'm out of time. I yield back.
So right there on camera, admitting Democrats are saying, yeah, we're just going to allow them. We're going to allow them to vote in these municipal elections. That it won't be a national election. Oh, okay. That's okay. So it is replacement. This is exactly what's happening, right?
Right. And keep in mind, this isn't just about the voting. Voting is just an intermediate step to full takeover, right? And once and they're allowing them to join the military now, police forces, intelligence, and that's for years. We've had Chinese communists joining our highest levels, Department of Homeland. We got people with the highest security clearances who people can't even understand them because of their Mandarin base accents, right? I mean, I hear so many things from inside those circles. We've literally got people that should not even be in the United States who have the highest security clearances working in communication centers and embassies and that sort of thing. We're totally ate up. We have to do we're going to have to get quite serious about this.
So when we get serious about it, I mean, what does that involve? I mean, you brought up a great point, like this feel-good moment of busing these illegal immigrants up to Chicago so we can stick it to Lori Lightfoot when she was mayor. We can stick it to Eric Adams and, hey, you want your sanctuary cities? That's great. But what we should be doing is putting those, if we have them, put them in those buses and turning them right around and heading back. So they're debating this craziness in Congress right now. What do we need to do right now? You're talking to Customs and Border Protection all the time. You're talking to these guys who want to protect the United States. Do they feel like they're getting the resources that they have that they need in order to carry out their job?
There are a lot of serious patriots still in the military and in, for instance, Border Patrol. I've never seen an organization leak more than Border Patrol. I mean, that's a sign of their morale right there. They are patriots. They want to save the United States. A lot of the other people on Border Patrol, I'm down there at the border a lot. A lot of them are just like gears and a clock, and they don't even know what time it is. In fact, they don't even know their gears and a clock. They're just, I'm doing my job, sir. How often do we hear that? We grew up hearing stories about World War II, and then I was lucky enough to be stationed in Germany in the Army. And, and I went and I studied a lot of these historical things that unfolded that were quite intense, obviously, genocide. And one of the reframes that we often heard was, I was just following orders, just doing my job. And I literally hear that on our U.S. border. Often people are like, look, I'm just doing my job. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to lose my pension. I'm like, do you understand? They will be loading you on buses soon, right? And it's with a one-way ticket. This is very deadly serious. But you can see how the average man, a common man, can just be like a gear in the machine. One retired colonel told me, he said, Michael, organizational structure dictates outcome, right? Organizational structure dictates outcome. And that's, just distilled truth right now. We've got this organizational structure that is now can be weaponized against us and has been. You see people like Lori Lightfoot and Biden and Obama. These aren't the causative agents. These are products of causative agents, right? Obama is just a poison fruit on a tree that was planted long before he was born, right? I went to his school, by the way, twice, where he went to elementary school. I went to that school twice over in Jakarta in Indonesia. He acts like he's some poor black child. Let me tell you what, look up Obama's school on Google Earth and you see nothing around it. It's like the Beverly Hills of Jakarta. It's a bunch of huge estates. It's high wall. Just look on Google Earth. I've been down there. I've been to his school twice. And they got a statue of him there. I think they don't like him too much, actually, based on my last trip there.
So these are all people that are just the cogs in a machine that's part of this replacement theory that has been happening now for the past few decades. Go back to listen to Biden, back 20 years ago talking about this. Listen to him just a number of years ago with Mayorkas talking about the takeover where they want to have this replacement. So I don't want to be 30,000 foot level, Michael. You're on the ground. You're seeing the mechanics of this unfolding every day. When we talk about a civil war in the United States, what are we exactly talking about? Like, what sides are we going to see? We're not talking North versus South, Mason-Dixon line. What are we talking about here?
Civil wars can be incredibly complex, right? It's like who runs the jungle. I was just down in the jungle in Darien with Brett Weinstein, and we were talking about the same thing. And I said, you're an evolutionary biologist. If somebody asks you who runs the jungle, what are you going to say? God runs the jungle, right? In civil war, especially one in such a complex environment that we have in the United States, I've been all over the United States, by the way. I've seen this country in great detail. And coast to coast, backing up and down from Key West all the way up, and one thing about the United States is we have a very complex and dynamic environment, which is now being overwhelmed by people that can't even speak English. They have no idea what human rights are, and they don't care, right? And that's one of the reasons they're being brought in. It's Tower of Babel. As you know, I'm often over in Europe looking at the same thing. They're at a slightly more advanced stage than we are, but we're catching up quickly. We've talked about Tri-State City on your show before. Tri-State City is an area between Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany where huge amounts of aliens are being pumped in order to take and create a smart city there, basically supplant all the Dutch farmers, and not just farmers. You always hear about the farmers. It's also the fishermen, right? It's also many other people that are key to keeping Netherlands going. Who's going to keep Netherlands going when they're gone? Who's going to keep Netherlands above water, right? Quite literally, it's the same in Germany and Belgium and all of these places. They're being supplanted. The people that created those countries and the people that keep those countries moving. One thing I saw about Al Qaeda, by the way, in Iraq, Al Qaeda in Iraq, they're very good at like knocking off a city, like in Bakuba. They knocked out, killed the politicians, ran them off, that sort of thing. But they can't run a water plant. They can't keep the lights on. They're a bunch of flying monkeys, right? And that's what's happening here. We're being replaced with flying monkeys because it's easy to be the arsonist, right? It's hard to actually be the architect that creates such an incredible country as the United States or Netherlands. There are quite a few incredible countries.
So are we talking about the fight really being between those who want to keep our country and those who are invading? Or are we talking about a more homegrown form of civil war in the United States, those who want to support this invasion? Or are we simply talking like Red Dawn style? They're coming across the border. Those that care about the United States are going to stand firm and try to protect the United States from this invasion.
All the above. All the above. The Red Dawn is unfolding right now with the Chinese specifically, right? Not to mention all the various ecosystems of Islamic terrorists. I mentioned a couple nights ago in Dripping Springs, right out this window, actually on a stage. I just talked for a couple minutes and I talked about HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Now, I'm often talking about Catholic charities. I'm often talking about Lutheran refugee services and that sort of thing. And I'm often talking about them, but I focused on HIAS specifically because Mayorkas is under impeachment hearings now, and Mayorkas was a board member on HIAS, right? So he was a board member of the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, and he is actually, you can see on HIAS.org, HIAS.org, they're actually congratulating Mayorkas for taking over Department of Homeland Security, right? Now, when he flew down to Darien on April 18th of 2022, I was there waiting for him. Came in 4 Blackhawks, landed right in front of me. I waited for 4 days. He landed right in front of me, went inside of this camp, which is about 40 yards away from the highest headquarters in Darien. In fact, it was a place I tried to rent. It's a house right in front of China Camp. We call it China Camp, right? And in Darien, they call it San Vicente Camp. But I actually was working to rent that house, and then Highest got it out from under me. So Highest actually is right in front of China Camp, the camp that's being used for Chinese to invade the United States and others. Syrians go through that camp every single day, as do Venezuelans, which means Hezbollah goes through constantly, right? And so China Camp is the camp that he went to and poured more money into and increased in size and efficiency. You should see the drone footage of the day that he's in there, April 18th, 2022, and what it looked like about 3 weeks ago when I was down there last time, right? I mean, it's tremendously larger. And by the way, the trailers in China Camp, San Vicente Camp, that's what they call it in Panama, San Vicente, the trailers are made in China, by the way. So American money, and Highest is, so that's why I'm talking about Highest. Naturally, there was Antifa here at this speech that I gave, actually, and got doxxed since then. Last night was doxxed, and said that when I was talking about Highest, it was anti-Semite, anti-Jew. I was saying very clearly, Jewish money is being used to pull in Hezbollah, who will clearly end up in Fort Lauderdale on a golf course screaming Allahu Akbar, right? I mean, and you can't make up this stuff, and then
they'll call you an anti-Semite. They'll call you an anti-Semite.
I'm like warning you not to take the jab. I'm warning you not to, I'm warning you not to keep funding these people coming through. They're going to show up in a synagogue in Brooklyn. And yet, that's anti-Semitism to Antifa, of course. But Antifa is part of that ecosystem of information warriors.
Well, we're watching this unfold. We're going to see what happens in the House of Representatives with this bill. I mean, it's laughable. I mean, it's laughable that they're literally including these provisions in here for voting, of course. We're seeing this happening right before our eyes. Americans need to wake up, That's why we're continuing to follow the story. It's, I think, the most important story in America right now. It's going to influence the United States for decades to come. Michael Yon is at the border. He's going to be monitoring things down there over the next few weeks before he heads back to Panama, watching the migrant flows from Panama up into the United States. Hopefully Congress wakes up and pays attention to the story that we're covering here. Michael, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Clayton. Doc Chambers really wanted to come on, but he got called away. And anyway, he wishes his best.
Yeah, Doc was going to be on with you tonight, so we'll get Doc on real soon. So tell him we're sorry we missed him tonight. But you guys are doing great work down there, and continued great work to you guys down there. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Clayton. Bye-bye.
I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. YouTube thinks that you'll actually like this next video right here. It's personalized based on your own viewing habits. So if you watch the video, please leave a comment. Let us know what you think about it, and we will see you next time, everyone.